Is there anything you would have done differently?
We reported a true story.
Our colleague Brian Williams is back in Kuwait City tonight after a close call in the skies over Iraq.
Controversial Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and questions about Kavanaugh's drinking in the past.
Sean Hannity, come on up, Sean Hannity.
Today, Andrew Cuomo is having a moment.
Hi, I'm Chris Steyerwalt.
And I am not Eliana Johnson.
She isn't. Welcome to Ink-Stained Wretches, where we break down what's going wrong and what's going right with the American news media. And America, let me tell you something. You are in for a treat. You are in for a real treat because Megan McCardle is with us today. Megan McCardle is one of the people in my life when I get to say that of the gifts of living in Washington and working in media and doing all of that stuff. And sometimes I say, I can't believe I'm actually friends with that person because it's a person whose writing I've admired for a long time, a person who has this great public intellectual life and does all that stuff. And Megan McCardle is one of the people that makes me happy to do what I do.
Megan McCardle is blushing.
Well, Megan McCardle.
Right back at you, Mr. Steyerwalt.
You can read Megan McCardle at the Washington Post, where how often do you write?
I write both editorials and a column now, so I write 2 to 3 times a week.
2 to 3 times a week, always excellent. And I will say, better and more equipoise on social media than almost anybody, because you manage to you've been in it and doing it for a long time, but you've never become a hose beast. You've never become a weirdo. You treat it. You wear it loosely, and that makes you good at it.
Well, I think actually, I have done all the tricks. I got brigaded for the first time in 2002.
What is it to be brigaded?
When you get mobbed by trolls.
Oh, okay.
That was it used to be called. It used to be known as being brigaded back in the blog days. And I have done all of the things. I have tried telling people how wounded I am. I have tried clapping back. I have tried. And what I realized after all of this is that there is only one thing to do when people troll you, which is to ignore them.
Yeah.
If you do anything else, you are giving them what they want, which is attention. And so I just don't, when a brigade forms up, I just leave social media for a while. I let them have their fun. And then I come back and I never even see it. And I think that a lot of people forget you don't have to be there. If people are bothering you, you can just not look and nothing will happen.
I am so fragile that I use a Twitter wrangler to produce content for me because I can't do, and something that you said a long time ago that helped me a lot was that when 20,000 people do something on Twitter or X, it feels like a lot of people, but that's about the size of a high school football game in Texas.
Yeah.
It's not that many people, but it feels, because of the way our brains are wired, it feels bigger. And so my solution to that is don't go. I don't go to the game. I don't like it. And because there is just this amazing sensation. You write something or have an appearance that you think went really well, was really good. You're feeling chuffed. You're da-da-da-da-da. And then you look at social media and it's like, you're garbage. I hate you. Your children are ugly. You're the worst person in the world. Oh.
I had an epiphany at one point that really turned me around because when 15 years ago, I would get upset about this. And then one day, it was a Saturday, and I had posted a recipe for vegan asparagus pasta. I was a vegan at the time.
I would have brigaded you for that.
It was not necessarily the best recipe ever. But here is the thing. Some dude goes postal on this recipe and tells me it's terrible and I'm stupid and I don't know how to cook. And I was about to get upset. And then I was like, it's a Saturday at 2 p.m. And this guy has decided he has nothing better to do with his time than to insult my recipe. Why do I care about this person's opinion? Well, it was really a turning point for me.
Just in hopes of triggering people online, I will show, I wore these pants to be in holiday spirit. And for the benefit of our YouTube audience, I'm going to show.
Oh my!
I'm going to let people know that that's the festive energy that we're bringing.
I also wore my Christmas pants, but they are not nearly
Yours are-
mine are just a green.
It's a sophisticated, a New Yorker, a fashionable New Yorker, sophisticated green. We're from different places. But let's get to the front page. Enough shilly-shallying, enough pants talk.
Up first on our front page, these are the stories that we thought were the most important this week.
Here we go. Now, last night, the Wall Street Journal posted the the fin de siècle, the coup de grace, maybe, on its once controversial reporting from early this year about Joe Biden's infirmity. And when we talked about the blowback to the Wall Street Journal in its original piece on this podcast, we laughed because there was blowback to the Wall Street Journal reporting something that was obvious to any living human being who had eyes to see and ears to hear, because Joe Biden was a wreck, and you could see that he was a wreck before the debate. Wall Street Journal comes out with a piece that quotes people who had been in meetings with Biden, including some Republicans, who said, yeah, the guy is way off his game. The Wall Street Journal, so this is Annie Linsky, among others at the Wall Street Journal, came back and dropped the 20 megaton bomb of triumph in this piece.
Yeah, that whole episode was so amazing. I mean, I was inside my newsroom, talking about this with people, and I think everyone could kind of see that there was something wrong, but there was a surprisingly to me wide variance in how wrong people thought things were going. And so I was watching someone who seemed like he was visibly incapable of being president. And other people were watching someone who seemed like, oh, maybe he's lost, maybe he struggles.
He doesn't
to
have
remember
his
names.
fastball
I
anymore.
do that
Yeah.
now, and we're mainstream media outlets were printing these accounts from his aides that was like, well, I mean, sure, that's what you see in these cheap fake videos, but there's like a secret Biden, and he is flitting around the back quarters of the White House like Batman, and he is sharp, he is on his game.
Have you heard about how long he rode on a train one time going to Ukraine? It was the really long train ride, and he did it great.
Yeah, and so when Annie Linsky came out with her piece, and watching the people piling onto this is calling it irresponsible to inform the nation about the state, saying, well, they'd relied too much on Republicans. And of course, they relied on Republicans because Democrats were keeping silent.
Yeah.
And now, but the thing I have wanted to read since then was, how bad was it? When did it start? And this piece is, I mean, first of all, yes, it is a victory lap, and well-deserved.
Yes.
Congratulations to Annie Linsky and Rebecca Ballhaus and Emily Glazer and Siobhan Hughes, who all deserve to take that victory lap, hands clasped over their head, because they not only got the story, they were willing to print the story. And, the way they got that story actually was that they decided to just focus on a handful of meetings where they could contact everyone who had been there, rather than getting the kind of White House runaround of, well, yeah, sure, you may have heard this from one guy, but here's 5 advisors telling you he's sharp as a tack. But what's actually stands out to me in this story is the fact that this started way earlier than I think we have appreciated up until now.
Here's a sample. If the president was having an off day, meetings could be scrapped altogether. On one such occasion in the spring of 2021, a national security official explained to another aide why a meeting needed to be rescheduled. Quote, he has good days and bad days. Today was a bad day, so we're going to address this tomorrow, the former aide recalled the official saying. While it isn't uncommon for politicians to want more time with the president than they get, some Democrats felt Biden unusually hard to reach. That's what Representative Adam Smith of Washington found when he tried to share his concerns with the president ahead of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021. Smith, a Democrat who then chaired the powerful House, it's always the powerful House Armed Services Committee, was alarmed by what he viewed as overly optimistic comments from Biden as the administration assembled plan for the operation. Quote, I was begging them to set expectations low, said Smith. And I'm not very sympathetic to the argument that this was a cover-up or that this was because it wasn't very well covered. It was, if it was a cover-up, it was a very ineffective cover-up. But I do find shameful the idea that when you have somebody like Adam Smith, who's a grown-up, right? He's an adult person who takes his job seriously, whatever you think of his views. And that if you have somebody like Adam Smith who's raising alarms about something very, very, very serious, and that it's not being taken seriously, that's dereliction, right? And Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, other people in the president's orbit who didn't say to him, and Hunter Biden said the opposite, obviously, didn't say to him, hey, man, we love you, but you got to go. That I think Joe Biden is a grown-up. He has to take responsibility for his own decisions. But the fact that the people around him were not able to say much sooner, this is it.
Yeah, and I think also, yes, he does have to take responsibility for his own decisions, but anyone who has dealt with the reality of a relative who's in cognitive decline,
yeah,
that's really hard. So first of all, it's just really hard in general, right?
Yes.
You know, that act of taking the car keys from dad is, I really feel grateful that I was spared that, and also that I take this the right way. My father died. We were going up to tell my father that we just couldn't figure out how to get him home from the nursing home, and we had hired a consultant, and my sister and I were like, we're going to schedule time to go up and have this conversation in person. My father refused to leave Massachusetts to the end, so we went up, and he got sick that weekend and he died. So I never had to tell him he wasn't coming home. These are really hard conversations, and I have some limited sympathy for the aides who did not want to have that conversation with Joe Biden. That said, my father was not running the United States.
right.
And at some point, you have to say that transcends party loyalty. It transcends personal loyalty. Icky feelings, right? Lots of kids man up and go to dad and say, nope, you've been in 4 fender benders and you can't drive anymore. And we are taking the keys, and I'm sorry this hurts you. And I am sobbing and you are sobbing, but like, this has to end. And that's a much smaller thing than the keys to the nuclear arsenal.
Lots of Democrats, I think rightly, said that when Donald Trump was spiraling out of control at the end of his first term, that people in his administration should have quit en masse. There was a bunch of them quit right after January 6th, but it was a little late.
Yes,
But as Trump was in a flat tailspin, can you be in a flat tailspin? I don't know. As he was going down, that Republicans of conscience should have stood up, should have 25th Amendmented him or whatever. And it's not identical, but it's the same thing, which is when you see a problem, you have an obligation. When you see a problem in the presidency, you have an obligation to the country to make it known.
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, the level of moralizing about why won't his party stand up to him? Why won't they do the right thing for the country? And believe me, I share all of that. I am still able to go into a frothing rage. The Republicans did not impeach and remove him from office.
So they couldn't convict him.
Bar him
Yeah.
from running again after January 6th, which is what they should have done. Look, I mean, water under the bridge. The guy's
But
gonna be
even for the
president
sake
now,
of
but-
the institution of the Senate, for the
Yes.
institution of Congress to say, no, this is too much.
Right. But at the same time, you have an obligation to make sure that the person who is in the main seat in the Oval Office is capable of doing that job when the proverbial 3 a.m. phone call comes. Remember how Hillary Clinton ran on how, do you want this man taking the 3 a.m. phone call? Well, I don't want Joe Biden taking the 3 a.m. phone call. And when you read this article, it looks to me like he really wasn't in shape to do that.
No. And for a long time.
For a long time. And that, you know, I actually remember covering the campaign in 2020. I was on the primary beat before, of course, everything went sideways. And I looked at him then, and I thought, is he gonna be able to make it through
Yeah.
a normal campaign? And I think he was shielded from that by COVID. I don't think he would have won, honestly.
I agree.
If it had not been for COVID, because he could not have kept up a campaign.
That's right. Basement
And
campaign was huge.
But then
benefit.
they just kept that, right? The excuses of COVID, which were to some extent valid, right? You protect your elderly principal from other people, but they just kept that going, and that allowed them to cover up what was really the infirmity and disqualification of the president.
I wrote about this at the Dispatch this week about watching Donald Trump have a press conference at Mar-a-Lago, and the reporters, many of whom I'm sure despise him, but the delight because here's how, after 4 years of Joe Biden, the fewest press conferences, the fewest interviews, the fewest everything. Donald Trump up on stage. You want to talk about drones? You want to talk about polio? You want to talk about the Duke lacrosse case? What do you got? And just them throwing them at him and him do it. And that weird, I called it the codependency of narcissists. In the National Press Corps and Donald Trump, they need each other. They need the content that he's throwing out. And Biden was providing none of that. Okay. Kamala Harris, digital chief. This is a Semafor piece. Kamala Harris is digital chief on Democrats losing hold of culture. Now, I flagged this good and interesting piece from Semafor by Max Tanney because of this, sports. So sports is the last common culture thing. I don't know if you're a sports consumer.
I do watch the Olympics.
So no. So the answer is no. I watch college football. I watch college basketball. I watch a little NFL, and I watch a decent amount of Major League Baseball. And as you must always say, the golf. Golf always comes with a V. And the right-wingification, the hardcore broification of this stuff. So Pat McAfee, there are these figures in sports who went from kind of political to increasingly political to endorsing candidates to doing all of this stuff. And the digital chief, Flaherty, told Max Tanney, it's not to say that Steph Curry and Steve Kerr and LeBron James and all of them coming out wasn't impactful. Don't say impactful. You don't need to say impactful. That's not a word. Or important. The word you meant was effective. It was more impactful because it had gotten so much harder. But certainly the culture that has been associated with heavy sports watching has become associated with right-wing culture in a way that makes it harder for us to reach people. Correct. And the gender gap for Democrats. So we have always talked about the gender gap for Republicans. The gender gap for Democrats is big, getting bigger, and substantially increased by the last place common culture for men is sports, and sports is getting real right-wingy.
What is so fascinating to me is that 5 or 6 years ago, this was the opposite of what people predicted. You looked at publications like Deadspin, which are getting heavy into progressive politics. You looked at things like Nike, giving an endorsement deal to Colin Kaepernick. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
That is correct.
I do not watch the sports ball. And the implication was this is the direction that sports is moving, and the future is female. It is, soft focus ads about girl bossing. And that is not proven to be the case. I'm a big fan, despite the fact that I know nothing about sports. I'm a huge fan of the House of Strauss newsletter.
Okay.
Which is Ethan Strauss, who was one of the first people to come out and point out, for example, NBA viewership is declining, and the politics has something to do with this.
If you look at the NFL, they were very woke is a too loaded term now, but from Colin Kaepernick and then through the George Floyd period, the NFL got hardcore, and the end zone said end racism, and it was very whatever. And then I noticed in watching the Steelers game watching the Steelers lose ignominiously to the Philadelphia Eagles, that the messaging now is like shifted, and now they say it's not end racism, it's like support police and help communities. So they've come to a much more muddled kind of whatever. And this is, you know what it's like? It's like the University of Chicago position for non-endorsement for universities. What did we call that?
The Chicago Statement.
The Chicago Statement, which fueled by Malort, that the Chicago Statement, but for sports, which is don't do politics because people will find it yucky.
Well, which is actually, I've been writing about this for a long time. My favorite story in this vein is that sometime around 2016, 2017, businesses got the idea that woke politics was the future.
Yep.
And my favorite story in this was that after Donald Trump was elected, Penzeys Spices, for anyone who is familiar with this mail order and retail spice shop, which I'd ordered from them for a long time.
There are some in my cabinet right now.
Right. So it turns out well, first of all, it doesn't turn out. He is very left.
Yeah.
And when Donald Trump was elected, he said, I don't want any of you Trump voters. He is terrible. You are disgusting.
Don't buy my spices. Don't buy my garam masala.
Okay. So it turns out that he is actually the heir to a different spice store that he left, a spice business that he left to found Penzeys.
What?
Yes, the Spice House. Well, that was run by his sister. She has, I think, since sold it, but at the time, run by his sister. So she immediately puts out a statement that says, we want everyone as a customer.
Right.
We welcome. And so, of course, Republicans start ordering from them. And I'm going to be honest. I was curious. So I tried them and I realized I just like Spice House spices better.
Oh, my gosh.
So I switched. It was not a political move. It was just I found them fresher.
Were you part of the January 6th attack?
I was.
Are you ready now to say that that fueled by cardamom, you were?
So we then had, Republican and Democratic spice companies. We had Republican and Democratic everything. And I thought this was terrible, that America needs spaces where we're not doing politics.
We don't talk about it.
We're not having an argument. We're just coming together over stuff. I have often said, when people say, well, what about these terrible, mindlessly patriotic displays of fighter jets and flags at football games? I'm like, no, we need more of that.
Do it.
Just more empty patriotic symbolism, because we need to come together. And the way you do that is by finding symbols that you're not going to fight about.
Right.
And so that was one of the reasons that I didn't like the kneeling protests. Not that I actually am very sympathetic to the cause for which they were kneeling.
Sure.
But that this space, I hoped, would be a place where we were going to actually have something in common rather than explore the things that divide us. And so I am glad to see people going back to a muddle. I am glad to see people de-emphasizing political content in their advertising and not, yes, you can kind of monetize a niche, but it just drives us further into separate spheres at a time when we really need to find places where we are all together as Americans.
Church, sports, restaurants and bars, the food culture, music. There's all of these spaces that don't need politics in them.
Indeed.
And that are diminished, not enhanced. Speaking of which, the wellness women are on the march. Reports The Atlantic in a piece by Elaine Godfrey on how the women of Instagram and right-wing, I guess, women of Instagram and enthusiasts for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and people opposed to basically me, I guess I would say, processed foods, excessive meat consumption, and all of that stuff, and how they are part of driving so if it's MAGA, then it's MAHA, is the Make America Healthy Again, would we say, Colin? MAHA, MAHA, MAHA. What do you make of this?
I think it is fascinating because this is the kind of culture that used to be mostly found on the left, right? I grew up on the Upper West Side in the 1970s and 80s. So I knew a lot of the moms who thought that they would live forever if they could just find the right vitamin supplement.
Right.
And where you would go to their house and it was all weird herbal things.
Yeah,
kelp supplements and lots of wheat germ. on your organic raw milk yogurt. They honestly, I can't say that I've noticed that they live longer than the parents of my friends who took us to McDonald's once a week, but who knows? Who am I to say? A lot of confounding variables.
Kelp could be doing wonders.
But it's now shifted right in a way that's super interesting. And there's something that is not entirely surprising about that, right? If you kind of lionize traditional things, well, what's more traditional than digging your own potatoes out of the dirt with your bare hands, having used no pesticides and lost 3/4 of your crop to bugs? I think that it's not entirely surprising, but I keep coming across one thing that actually really does surprise me is how much it has penetrated to men. I got into the most fascinating conversation about receipts with a young conservative man. Right?
What
Colin,
is this?
Yeah, receipts are bad for you. There's something in the ink. It kills your testosterone.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah. Receipts, you're supposed to sort of take them with tweezers and refuse them when you can. If you
Is it
can't,
'cause it's
use
soy
gloves.
ink?
Yeah, the heat-sensitive paper.
So are you telling me that CVS is responsible for alert Tim Carney that CVS is actually responsible for the declining birth rates? Is this what we should understand?
There is some. But I was surprised to find a man getting into. Usually young men in their 20s they still think they're immortal. They're just doing keg stands with a pile of raw meat in one hand and a bong in the other.
Oh, you knew me.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you had been through West Virginia.
I actually did. When I was in college, I did go through West Virginia. I spent a week with Habitat for Humanity rehabbing an opera house.
Where?
Pocahontas County.
Pocahontas.
They pronounced it Pocahontas. We were.
I think you may have been hearing.
Okay.
You may have been hearing Pocahontas because when you're from Southern West Virginia, you're gonna have your vowels.
Okay.
Your vowels are gonna get all squeezed up in the middle there.
So Pocahontas County, yeah, we rehabbed the opera house in Pocahontas.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So I had my first pimento cheese experience, and loved it.
Probably there in what would that be, Marlinton maybe?
Yeah, it was Marlinton.
Look at me with still my golden horseshoe level of knowledge for West Virginia's 55 counties. Okay.
So anyway, it was a surprise to see young men
Yeah.
get into this in a way that I had not seen before.
I think the Tesla analogy also holds that it works in that direction that you described. So it works ground up, but it also works top down, which is the semiotics of political meaning are flipped.
Yeah.
What's a Tesla? A Tesla is obviously the number one sign of being a soy boy, San Francisco, elite, woke, blah, 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 blah. Wait, check that. Owning a Tesla is a sign that you are ready to make America great again and da-da-da-da-da. So there's the bottom-up part and then there's the top-down part, and I think this has both.
Yeah, well, I will say that actually surprised me less because my husband went to a small religious college in Kentucky and has a lot of friends of the sort of people who go to small.
Where?
Asbury.
Wow. You're we're taking a deep dive. You have a more hillbilly background than I thought.
I just
Very
spent the weekend in Lexington, Kentucky, visiting his friends and picking up a puppy
Stealth
from
hillbilly.
Boonville, Indiana.
Stealth hillbilly.
But so these guys are all engineers, and a lot of them got into Teslas not because they were into climate change, but because the technology was cool, and these things accelerate really fast. And so I think there was always that potential there, and maybe there was some latent potential for the receipts discourse.
For the receipts
that
discourse.
I was not picking up at the time, but in retrospect should be obvious to me.
All right, moving on to Trump World and Disney/ABC paid Donald Trump. Well, it's a bit of a it's a bit of a scam. So it can be said that Disney is going to pay Donald Trump $15 million for George Stephanopoulos saying that Donald Trump had been found liable for rape when in reality he had been found liable for, I don't want to get sued. Ink Stained Wretches doesn't have that kind of budget. But that, well, I'll
Sexual abuse, I
Yes.
believe, is the
sexual abuse instead of rape or sexual assault. And when Trump filed the lawsuit against ABC, I laughed because obviously that's an error. Donald Trump is the most public figure in human history. And that's an error, a very understandable or legitimate error that a person would make about not understanding the difference between sexual abuse, sexual assault in New York Civil Code, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I laughed. And then Disney was like, I'll tell you what, how about 15 mil? Now, the scam part of it is that it's $15 million to eventually be made available to Donald Trump's presidential library. And it will be held in escrow until then. So Disney can put, I don't know, whatever value in, knowing that it will grow. They can park half that amount there in the expectation that it will grow. So they're getting off, and they're not giving it to Trump. It's going. And by the way, it made me think of something amazing. What will Donald Trump's presidential library be like?
It will be completely covered in gold.
The Vatican will blush.
Yes.
At the Donald Trump presidential libray.
Yes. The Sistine Chapel will look like high modernist.
Garbage. Yes.
Compared to it. I was at the convention in 2016. Do you remember that incredible, like, gold, black and gold, phenomenal, like, sprinklers going off and so forth? Show that, set that they had. I didn't see it.
Oh.
Because at Bloomberg, the senior people got the press passes for the big speech, right? If you're at a news organization, you get to the convention, and each organization only gets so many passes. So you get there like on Monday, and you're a more junior person, you can just wander around on the floor.
Yeah.
By Thursday.
You have a stack of credentials that are hanging around your neck, and they take you to various depths of access.
So by Thursday, the important people have parachuted in, and therefore you are no longer.
Al Hunt's got your tag.
Your tag, and so I ended up. It was actually very useful though, because I ended up sitting behind the stage, right at floor level, but behind it, and I couldn't go on the floor. And so all I did was look at the audience. And I saw these incredible reactions as he comes out and the curtain goes up, and I didn't understand them until I watched the video and saw that. So I would expect something even more spectacular from his presidential library. I'm thinking something like the Burj Al Khalifa.
Yes,
gigantic, gaudy, and Trumpian.
And it has to be in Florida, I assume.
I don't know. Yeah, University of Florida would probably be a good place for it. I mean, it's usually attached to a university, right?
Yes,
So,
but Donald Trump, I'm sure, will be thinking about this question. Is already thinking very much about this question. How will he profit by it personally? Who letting people audition for it? Will he do it at the University of Florida? Will he do it? But he could also do it. I don't think Penn will be interested.
I suspect.
I suspect
not.
Penn will not be interested, but he could also do sort of off-brand, right? He could do it at Liberty, or he could do it at some other place that would give him, because the danger if he goes to Florida is that there's a process and there's a board and that there's people. But if you go someplace else, you can just go bananas, right? You could just raise $200 million.
What about Fordham, where he started out before he transferred?
Long Island
is.
How would the Taj Mahal look if it were in Mineola? I don't know.
I would love to see the presidential library rising in the Bronx.
So the criticism of ABC is that the criticism of Disney is that by paying this money to make this problem go away, they're encouraging Trump. And I heard some people say, well, it's not necessarily a slippery slope. And then, of course, the next day, Donald Trump sued Ann Seltzer, the pollster for the Des Moines Register, for, quote, election interference, for putting out an errant poll shortly before the election.
This is possibly the most ridiculous lawsuit ever filed on multiple levels. First of all, making a mistake is not an election interference. Second of all, This poll helped him.
Yes.
It is good when your opponents erroneously believe that they are massively ahead.
Yes.
Because then they're not as enthusiastic about their
And
ground
your people,
game. They're
and
not
your
trying
people
as hard.
scramble. Yes.
Yep. And so the idea that he is suing someone who, I mean, actually, I'm not even sure I would call it a mistake. Seltzer's poll reflected the fact that it was really hard to sample Trump voters.
Yep.
And what most pollsters were doing was adjusting their polls for that.
And she
And
did not.
Seltzer was like, I don't know how to do that. I'm just putting it out there. These are the results I got. There is nothing dishonest. There's nothing election interference. I have no idea why he is even filing this lawsuit.
Well, one assumes that having gotten this money from ABC, and Trump has threatened to sue and sued a bunch of people, and he is a very litigious person. And of course, the downside for Trump is that he loses mostly, and probably would have lost the ABC case, but would have had a painful deposition. The discovery process would have been painful for both Stephanopoulos and Trump, and would have been bad for ABC's brand. I understand why they didn't want to do it, but of course, Ann Seltzer is not the Walt Disney Corporation.
Indeed.
And Donald Trump has a lot of people who want to be his lawyers. And when you get sued, you have to do something about it, right? It's now incumbent on you. And then there is, of course, not to be a ridiculous person, but there is a chilling effect, right? The chilling effect. So Donald Trump is getting ready to be president again. And the coverage, this is unrelated, but I think there's a thread here. Watching, as we record this, Washington is in the grip of shutdown frenzy, shutdown fever. And Donald Trump has told House Republicans that in addition to spiking Mike Johnson, and I got to give Mike Johnson some credit here. That was a wild throw that he came out with on a giant omnibus dressed or a omnibus pretending to be a continuing resolution.
The Cromnibus.
The Cromnibus.
The Cromnibus returns, bigger and better than ever.
With funding to do a new stadium for the Washington Commanders and a pay raise for Congress, just this wild undertaking. And so in addition to spiking that, Trump wants an increase in the debt ceiling to be passed under, as he said, helpfully on his social media platform, Biden should have to sign this. I don't want to have to sign this. Now he's saying to House Republicans, I want you to vote for it. I want you to raise the debt ceiling, but I don't want to have to sign an increase to the debt ceiling. And it just all of this stuff puts me in mind of the same thing, which is Trump believes that he is going to be able to really plow through opposition this time in a way that he ultimately was not able to the last time. And whether it's the Supreme Court's decision on presidential immunity, whether it is having Elon Musk on his side, having social media, all of this stuff. And I think this is one more that ABC, to the critics of ABC's decision, to their point, this one more piece in the basket of giving Trump a lot. And I don't know whether we will end up saying they gave him enough rope to hang himself, or whether we will say they gave him enough momentum that he blasted through. I don't know.
I mean, I think it's right that he is not going to have the opposition that he faced last time for a bunch of reasons.
Yeah.
His opponents in his party have mostly left. The media is exhausted and also losing money at a rate that it was not. There's not going to be the kind of money in the resistance that there was last time around, I think. People are exhausted and they're just ready to do something with their lives, which is not doom scrolling and obsessing. But I also think that, ultimately Trump's main enemy is reality. Interest rates are higher than they used to be. Inflation is now a risk in a way that it was not in 8 years ago. And that's just the Republicans bowling over Republicans can't fix the problem that if you spend a bunch of money, inflation will go up and then everyone will hate you.
Yeah. And
That's not, and you can't jawbone the markets. You can't threaten to primary the Fed. That is the reality. Is you got to work within the economic constraints you have, which are much tighter than they were.
And you follow these things much more closely than I do, and by which I mean you understand them and I do not. But basically,
So we lightheartedly hope.
What the Federal Reserve basically is saying is, oh, there's another big round of tax cuts on the horizon, and we're going to have more inflation. There's tax cuts and tariffs are both on the horizon, so we're going to trim our sails a little bit here because we think inflation is going to be
Batten
a
down the
problem.
hatches. It's coming.
Yeah, and the Democrats are telling a story which is Joe Biden didn't get credit for the great economy, and he's going to leave Donald Trump on third base, and Trump's going to act like he hit a triple. And I say, I don't know. I don't know whether Trump is on third base. I think things may get rocky.
Predictions are hard, especially about the future.
Right.
So it is really, there's the old joke that like economists have predicted 10 out of the last 2 recessions.
Right.
And it is actually really hard to say. It's kind of surprising that we have gone as long as we have without a recession. If you kind of bracket the pandemic, which was not caused by a business cycle, it was just caused by the world shutting down. It's really surprising that we haven't had a real downtrow in the business cycle for a long time. And it could come at any time. We don't know. What we do know is that there was this very weird period between about 2008 and 2020 in which it kind of didn't seem to matter how much money we spent. Markets didn't care. Currency markets were fine. Bond markets, totally chill. Whatever,
Modern monetary policy. It doesn't matter
Yeah,
anymore.
it doesn't matter. Inflation didn't rise no matter what you did. And that period is over. And I think that Democrats have just started to grapple with it because while there were people in the White House who were warning them that inflation was going to happen if they just kept spending money, they were like, ha, 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 that's old school thinking. Republicans are now going to have to learn that same lesson because I promise you, Trump is not coming in thinking that if I do this, this is going to cause inflation that everyone will hate. He is just thinking about, I want to spend money, I'll write checks, I'll blame someone else. That's what the Democrats thought they could do. It doesn't work that way. You're in the big boss seat. If inflation goes up, it doesn't even matter if it's your fault.
Yeah.
Most of the inflation that people got mad at Biden about was caused by one of two. It was caused either by the pandemic shutdowns or, frankly, by a lot of relief spending that Trump did.
Yes.
Didn't matter. He was in the seat. He got the blame.
And they got the ball. The ball was already rolling, and Biden said, one more time, Cincinnati.
One more time.
One
he
more
made
time.
it worse.
Yeah.
But he probably was not responsible for most of it. But it doesn't matter. You get credit for good stuff that happens and blame for bad stuff that happens, and there's no spinning it.
If you made an inquiry to an official American institution, a governmental institution, let's say West Point, and you were checking out a report that someone, let's say someone nominated to be the Secretary of Defense, that you were checking out to find out whether this person had ever been accepted to West Point. You were checking out his story in which he claimed to have been accepted to West Point. And West Point said, no, we have no record of this person ever being admitted to West Point. Would you then write a story about how West Point was wrong, or would you shelve the story?
I would probably shelve the story on the assumption that this is probably an honest mistake. So there's actually 2 stories here, I think.
Okay.
There is whoever leaked this to ProPublica.
Yeah.
And that person, I might be tempted to burn. But the officials at West Point were just, I would bet that what happened is that there was, at some point, they migrated their system from an old one to a new one. The database wasn't compatible with the new thing. They just archived it and forgot about it. And then someone who was probably about 12 and to whom, the 1990s might as well have happened around the time of the Battle of Hastings. And it just did not occur to them that this might have happened.
Yeah.
Probably saw Hegseth, say he'd been admitted, looked it up, didn't find it in the system, did not
And
occur
said,
to him that there
yeah.
might be an archive, or her, that there was an archive that was missing, leaked it to ProPublica. And then what happened was that someone else at West Point made the same mistake. How much of a story is this? Not a huge story. Because these are sort of honest mistakes that people could make. And honestly, I think, a lot of conservatives got mad about this.
Yeah.
And they're not really mad because West Point had a system glitch. They're mad because they don't think that ProPublica would have reported this story at all if it had been a Democrat. That they would not have been interested in a Democrat who maybe said he was admitted to West Point and wasn't actually. They would have thought, is this really a story? Who cares? Right? He said it on a podcast. And that what people are actually mad about is that there is partisan media out there. But here's the thing. There's partisan media on the right, and they do the same thing. They are more interested in stories that make Democrats look bad and less interested in stories that make Republicans look bad. And the fact that this got facilitated by what I think was pretty obviously an understandable technical error, I just don't see that as a big story.
And I would not have reported a story about this being wrong either, because it would bring attention even to the question, right? So if somebody says, hey, there's a filing down there that says that, the Bucket of Blood bar never got its liquor license. Okay, well, I'll go, which is a real place that you can, I don't know if you can still visit in Ohio County or on the Brooke-Ohio County border. And I went and found out that the Bucket of Blood did have its liquor license. I don't think I would do a story about questions around liquor license resolved.
Yeah.
And
because there's going to be people who just think where there's smoke, there's fire. And people get fed a lot of oppo that doesn't work out.
Yeah.
And the correct thing to do is to just not print it. It's not to explain why the oppo that you were fed is wrong, unless it's really egregious. Right? If someone is wandering around claiming that someone has committed a murder, and you know that this is not true, and you also know that some less scrupulous reporter might go out there with that story. I don't know. I might sort of run that and say there is this lunatic wandering around claiming completely falsely. But even then, you risk airing the accusation that that isn't true and making people not. It's actually shocking to me. I'm in a writers group with people who are not professional writers. And so I sort of offhandedly, in one of the pieces that I submitted to this, mentioned the old UVA rape hoax. And if people don't remember, Rolling Stone printed a brutal story about a gang rape at UVA fraternity that turned out not to be true. And what was fascinating to me was that one of the people who said it was, wow, I had no idea that story wasn't true. She remembered the story. She had never heard the correction. And that is the danger.
That's the danger. That's the danger. Okay, that means it's time for us to move on to our business news section. And Neil Cavuto is leaving Fox News. It was reported just as we sat down. And I just wanted to note that and note Neil navigated his time at Fox better than almost anyone. And he did it because, I don't know whether you know this, or why you would. He did something very smart. When they were standing up Fox Business, he got, and the original vision of Fox Business was that it was going to be like the Wall Street Journal, but on TV. And that is not what it ended up being. But Neil secured in his contract that he was the president of Fox Business. He got an official title attached to it.
I did not know that.
And what Neil got was autonomy, right? He got to set his own schedule, do his own shows. He got hand. He negotiated for himself hand. And this guy was the hardest working human being. And even after he was diagnosed with MS, this guy, 5, 6, 7 sometimes days a week, doing his show, doing all of this stuff, and always keeping to, especially, and I say this is a person who has a show on cable news, to to a pretty high standard for cable news, and holding it in there. So congratulations, Neil, on doing well. You were one of the good ones.
I have to say, my father was a devoted fan of Neil Cavuto. He started watching Fox Business because my husband used to go on Kennedy's show.
Oh, yeah.
But boy, every day there was Dad. I believe it was at 4 p.m. watching Neil Cavuto. Religiously loved it. Said it was the best show on TV.
I
So
enjoyed
farewell and thank you for bringing my father so much joy.
Fox Business. I wrote about this in a book, but the Fox Business was the cause of my father buying a second television. He had picture-in-picture, and as I explained to him, he didn't care for that. So he just bought, and this is one of the revolutions of dematerialization. He could go to Sam's Club and buy another giant television for $350 or whatever. And so in the little nook off of his bedroom, he had two televisions the size of a World War II aircraft carrier on top of each other. They were on top of each other so he could have both Fox and Fox Business on at the same time. And as I
Doesn't
wrote,
get better than that.
there was enough radiation coming off of those screens that you could have cooked a hot dog just by holding it up in the air. That was Neil Cavuto. MSNBC, headline, Wall Street Journal, MSNBC and CNN fight to dig out of a post-election ratings hole. You alluded to this, madam.
Yes.
And here's what the piece says. While the viewers are flocking to Fox News in the wake of Donald Trump's election win last month, ratings for MSNBC and CNN have tumbled. The declines are worse than what happened the last time Trump won in 2016. MSNBC averaged 600,000 primetime viewers from the day after the election through December 6th, down by more than half from the network's year-to-date average through the election, according to Nielsen data. Dubious Nielsen data, I'll only point out. CNN was down 46% to 401,000 viewers. Meanwhile, Fox News was up 12%, averaging about 2.7 million viewers. Now, the question is, and they've spun off MSNBC into a sale-ready suite of cable offerings that NBC Universal is ready to flush. CNN has been on its journey. The question is, do they bounce? They bounced back last time, and what you alluded to is that the panic, the alarm around whether it's that, to use a word that was abused so badly the first time around 8 years ago, normalized. Whether Donald Trump and the moment is so normalized now that people shrug at it and they don't care, or that the resistance is exhausted to the point that they just can't. The question for you is, do they come back?
I think not in the way that they did 8 years ago. And I think for a bunch of reasons. Number one, young people are moving towards Trump. So, what they really want is in the demo, right?
Yeah.
Is in your young, relatively young viewers who are going to buy stuff.
Yes, who
Old
have
people,
disposable income.
Right, who have disposable income, but also there's like option value. If you get
Right.
someone at 20 and they like your product, you have a customer for a long time. If you get someone who's heading into a nursing home, there's just limited upside there
Right.
as a company. And so part of it is that you're not going to get that energy. Part of it is that I do think that audiences are burned out. And part of it is that he won the popular vote.
Yeah.
And so I think you have seen this kind of shift among journalists, among political operatives, where they're just not, they don't have that same kind of manic, let's have some protests, let's have this. Because what are you going to protest? Dude won the popular vote. He won the election. The results were legitimate. What is there to protest? That people got to vote for the candidate they wanted?
And now 8 years ago, it was Hillary Clinton was as the youth would say, a buns candidate. And it was a low turnout election, and Russia and Donald Trump won, and it was a fluke. And the emphasis among many Republicans and certainly many in the media was, when this is over, we'll go back. Things will go back to when will this come back? And I think that what the 2024 election confirmed is there is no rewind button. There will be new things. Maybe they will be worse. Maybe they will be better. Maybe they will be more ignoble. Maybe they will be more decent. I don't know. But the idea of Trump as what people used to a symptom, not the cause. He's a symptom, not the cause. And if we can tweak the dials here a little bit, and we can go back to the way that things were there, and so Trump's reelection means there's no going back.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to resist what many would. By the way, speaking of the continuing resolution, I shouldn't pick on this person, but I listened last night, sitting on set, to an interview with the congressman from South Dakota, Dusty Johnson, and he said that he wanted a CR that bends the arc of history toward freedom. And I thought, CRs shouldn't really be bending any historical arcs. But whatever way the historical arc is bending, it's bent, right? Whatever Trump means or meant or da-da-da. And now we go from here, or we don't go back. I could have made this my obsession, but should be flagged. Australia to charge big tech companies that don't pay for news. So Australia passed legislation that said you must pay for news to Meta and other companies. You must pay for news. So what did they say? If you want to put news content up, you've got to enter into agreements to pay for the news from entities. So what did they say? Yeah, we're good. We're not gonna.
Yeah.
We won't do news. That's fine. We don't really need news. And Australia has a small population, and they said that's fine. We won't do that, because the reason people go online, especially for Meta's products, for Instagram particularly, they're not going for news. They're going for dog videos. And you just got a new dog. And do you do Instagram?
I have an Instagram account, but I'm very bad at it.
Let me just say that as my Jessica has discovered with Higgins, the corgi, dog content and Instagram, it's a match made in puppy heaven.
It is going to heal America.
It's going to heal
more cat videos and dog videos.
More dog videos. So Meta said, nah, we're good. And other tech companies said, nah, we're good. And Australia said, no, actually, what we meant to say was, you must do it. So it's no longer you must pay if you do. Now it is compulsory news product purchase by for tech companies that Australia is trying to legislate. Australia to charge big tech companies that don't pay for news. This is from the Times of London. Australia will force big tech companies to pay for journalism under a new scheme that seeks to punish global platforms such as Facebook for refusing to sign local news content deals. Wow.
I think this is really bizarre. I mean, I am not entirely clear how this is going to work. But yes, the thing that has happened is that news organizations went after Facebook for stealing their traffic. And Facebook was like, okay,
good. We're good.
We're good. We don't need news. Like, it makes everyone mad. I can't sell ads against it. What if I just didn't have that at all? What if I just de-emphasized that? And news organizations were like, no, but that's not what I meant.
Yeah, that's not what I
wanted
meant.
you was... and similarly, this seems like basically the idea is, okay, well, you're competing for attention with news, and that's making news less financially viable. So we're going to force you to subsidize your competitors. And I mean, frankly, like, the tech platforms can afford it, but this is stupid.
And also they can afford to say goodbye to Australia, right?
Yeah,
Australia is not a huge country.
Honestly, they could afford to say good. They almost have said goodbye to political news here.
Yeah.
Right. And because this goes way back. I remember in like 2010, someone telling me that they were going to do a politics news startup, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you can't sell ads against that, right? And they were like, what do you mean? I was like, look at the bodies of all of these startups littering. They have all done the same thing. As people increase their politics vertical, because the politics vertical drives a ton of traffic.
Yes.
And the problem is you cannot sell ads against that traffic because it makes people angry.
Yes.
And if you are selling yogurt or shoes, what you don't want is someone looking at your shoes next to a story that has made them angry.
That's
you
right.
want them to feel happy.
Dog videos.
And so this has been the eternal problem with every site that has thought, wow, there's just a traffic fire hose here, which there is. And then there is not a revenue fire hose to go with it. And so Facebook decided I'd rather have the revenue than the traffic. And there is no way to fix that problem.
Elon Musk went the other way and said Twitter can be, or X can be, a lost leader, basically.
Right.
That it can be a garbage hellscape of political content and whatever, and posts about receipts sapping your essential male energies.
Well, but he's also trying to monetize it with subscriptions, right? That is how you monetize political content.
So,
it's not by ads, through subscription.
And just like many partisan siloed news outlets have, you want super users. You're going to push. You're going to use that high intensity super users. He's going to try and monetize it that way. And then he's doing something else, which is using that as leverage to do other things. So if X, and we talked about the continuing resolution, goes down because Elon Musk goes on X and says, and J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, you may not vote for this, you may not vote for it. I had a weird flashback. Tell me if this makes any sense. I was reminded of Breitbart in the halcyon days of immediately post Andrew Breitbart, Steve Bannon, early Breitbart. And it was a similar thing. They could put it out. They could have a story that would go out. We were all following it. I'm reading Breitbart.com to figure out, like, okay, who's coming after. Do you remember Paul Ryan got primaried?
Oh, yeah.
And they came after him, and Breitbart was coming after him and all that stuff. And he won, and that sort of helped break the fever. But I saw, this is like that. Maybe it's on a much bigger scale, because it's the richest man in the world and it's not Steve Bannon, but it's on a much bigger scale. The question then becomes, does it last? Does that work? And Elon Musk's net worth has gone up by an astronomical sum because of the perceived influence, the influence he has with Donald Trump as a result of his acquisition of X, has driven investors bananas to buy Tesla stock, to buy SpaceX stock, and sent his net worth skyward.
And Musk is always, I don't understand why his net worth is so high. And to be clear, I am not a Musk critic. I think Teslas seem like they're good cars. He should not have called the driver assist program autopilot. But other than that, they seem like they're good cars.
Yeah.
I can't have an electric vehicle. I've got nowhere. I live in the city and have nowhere to charge it, but seem like they're good cars. SpaceX, genuinely revolutionary and amazing.
Totally.
And so I think that there is a mystique that he has gone into so many businesses and made them work. And I highly recommend reading Walter Isaacson's biography, which is really, really useful on this topic, that he really is a kind of managerial mad genius. That said, I'm not sure he should be worth twice as much as Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates or other people who really have large, very successful businesses. And a lot of it seems like a bet on the future.
Right.
But look, Elon Musk is in his 50s. He has, I think, pretty much at this point maxed out the amount of energy he is able to commit to his 97 companies. And so I don't understand what the valuation is, even though I think that it's worth something. And maybe the answer is that it's political juice. But I'm not even sure what would he get out of the political juice that makes him worth that much. I am unclear.
People are here for it. You were here for this piece from honestbroker.com. Mainstream is now fringe, and fringe is mainstream. Do tell.
So the idea is basically that the things, as a member of the legacy media, that the prestige, the influence, that where you want to be if you're in politics or have a product or anything else, is that you want to get that mainstream media juice. And that is not what is happening right now. Instead, arguably, it's that the mainstream is now becoming kind of a niche product.
Yeah.
If you look at, I think, actually, I will say this is changing for us, I think, in the wake, and I have no insider information. I have things that are observable to anyone. But I look at our comments section, which used to be reliably extremely angry progressives. There are still many extremely angry progressives, at least angry at me in the comments. But there's now a bunch of conservatives.
Yeah.
And so I actually think we may be moving in the direction of having picked up some more conservative readers after the scandal in which Jeff Bezos declined to endorse a candidate in the last election. But
Made the difference. Kamala Harris would have won had only the Washington Post endorsed her.
I wish we had that kind of influence. But I think that this is that when I was growing up, when I was in college, right? Maybe I actually did read The Economist, but maybe I didn't read Time Magazine every week. But I knew what Time Magazine was, and you could see that by the time I was 40, I too would have a subscription to Time Magazine.
Everyone would.
Because everyone would. That there was this hierarchy, there was niche stuff, but you still sensed yourself entering into a mass culture in which you would broadly participate. And that's just not the case anymore. Now these kids are watching podcasts. They are watching movies. They are watching stuff that I've never heard of and probably will never hear of. And they are totally mystified. They've never opened an article from the Washington Post and can't imagine why anyone would do that. And so we are now kind of more of a niche product for people who are pretty liberal. They tend to be in their 40s, 50s, or above.
College educated.
That what used to be a mass culture, where the places like the Post and the New York Times were the apex of this mass culture, that is now what the mass culture is totally separate, has almost no reference to us, and has larger audiences than we do.
This is Dave Eggers wrote a book called The Circle a long time ago, back in the beginning of all of this, right? So this is like, I don't know, 2007 or something. And the moral of the story in The Circle is that if everything is filmed and everything is online, then there's no more shame. There's no more anything, because nothing is singled out because nothing matters anymore, right? And we went through a period in which we believed that online life, digital life, would mean that we could know everything. We could see everything. It would finally be possible to know and see everything. And then what we found out was that we would know nothing. That we would know nothing because it would all get lost. It would all get subsumed into a tide of, in this piece, the list of names of who the top streamers from the USA and Canada in 2024: Kai Cenat, Jinzixi, XQC. Did either of you two younger gentlemen know who any of these people are? Dang, damn it, I'm old.
We are old.
I'm so back in my day, we didn't have to worry about who XQC was. No,
that's all right. We're gonna find a nice porch with some rocking chairs where we can just watch Friends reruns to our heart's content.
Let me tell you about the time we switched to U.S. News from Time.
Did you do that? Really?
My father canceled our Time subscription in protest over some cover. I can't remember what cover, but I remember as a distinct. He had a wastebasket in the library that was his office. And it was a big brass, and it had ships on it. I don't know why my mother purchased a giant brass waste can with ships on it. Very masculine. As Jack Donaghy would say, the only two suitable subjects for a painting: horses and ships.
It sounds very 80s in a way that I am here for.
Yes.
I want to bring back the earth tone, like the deep rubies and the hunter green.
Have you seen Fraser Corps? Are you familiar with Fraser Corps? The 90s quiet affluence mode of fashion and style that is reminiscent of the sets of Frasier, of the TV show Frasier. But this was 1980, I don't know, whatever, 88 maybe. And he threw the Time magazine with thunderous clap into that waste. He said, "That's it." And he almost never took the Lord's name in vain, but he said GD. And on that day, we became a U.S. News household, and it was a rupture after many decades.
Wow.
Many decades. I'm sure that my grandparents were subscribed to Time magazine. And so after...
That was the real divide, actually, was whether you were Newsweek or Time.
Well, a lot of everyone knew that Newsweek was for radical, liberal, counter-reactionary people.
Interesting. 'Cause I grew up on the Upper West Side, and I perceived it as the Republican news magazine.
That you thought that Newsweek was?
Yeah, that was its rep.
Really?
Yeah, on the Upper West Side. That was, or actually, I should say, that was what the parent of a friend once told me. She was like, "Well, that's just a Republican rag. We don't." I think it was because it printed George Will. She did not like George Will.
Oh my gosh! And George Will, who just celebrated 50 years.
Yes, 50 years of punditry, and embarrassingly is still the best in the business.
He's so
and
good.
it shames me that I cannot keep up with.
As Kevin Williamson said, he was doing a George Will impersonation, and then I realized that I was doing a Kevin Williamson impersonation of doing George Will impersonation. I was like stepped on twice before I could even get to my George Will impersonation. Okay, you flagged this piece on the CEO assassination before shooting. Brian Thompson worried about United Health's negative image from the same said Washington Post. What say you?
Well, this came up because I think it is something that kind of gets underreported. This was from the Washington Post, is that he helped with the pandemic in a way that just didn't get out there. So basically, we needed to move a lot of money really quickly during the pandemic. This was a broad problem with a lot of programs. You also had this with the banks that were trying to get money into small businesses. And, the government couldn't figure out how to get the money out the door, and United Healthcare stepped in. And that Thompson understood that the company had a bad image. But that's in part because what we see is the face of, oh, well, they denied this, they denied that. And we don't see the stuff that's behind the scenes where they're trying to make sure your copays are lower, or to do other things where they're trying to sell health insurance to your company by offering value. What we see is we only interact with the insurer because our companies buy it for us mostly. We only interact with them when something's gone wrong and we want them to give us money to pay for treatment that we think we should have. But like every other system, we have to do rationing. That's not something that's unique to American health insurers. It happens in Canada. It happens. I mean, there's actually a sad story that was circulating this week about a young Canadian man who went to the ER. There was a 12-hour wait. They gave him an EKG, couldn't find anything wrong, and he eventually left and went home and died of a torn artery that they didn't catch. And you see these stories in the U.S. too, and my point is not, oh, well, Canadian socialized medicine is a disaster. It's that this stuff happens everywhere, but when it happens in our system, we tend to think of it as an indictment of the system rather than as something that happens in healthcare, because we're human and we have unlimited wants and limited resources to pay for them.
The accused killer of the United Healthcare CEO ended his time on the lam at a McDonald's in Altoona, PA. Shout out to the Altoona Curve and their mascot steamer. That heading out into the hinterlands of Pennsylvania, where he got nabbed at McDonald's. And writing at the Free Press, Chris, and I never have known how to say his name.
Arnaud, I believe.
So Chris Arnaud, who a Wall Street guy who became famous on Twitter, traveling the country, going from McDonald's. He was on the vanguard of something that J.D. Vance was part of, which was the re-understanding of the American heartland and the working class, particularly the white working class. And Arnaud did it through the lens of McDonald's. Now he does it around the world, and he travels around the world and gives us sketches by walking across. I think he just finished in Poland, Japan. He goes around the world and walks around and talks to people and eats where they eat and does what they do. And at the Free Press, the year of McDonald's and how the Donald Trump's visit to McDonald's, the centrality of McDonald's to American life. It's a good read.
I have actually walked around Washington, D.C. with Chris.
Yeah? Did you go to a McDonald's?
No, we went to a Denny's. And I have
Where
to
is
say,
there a Denny's in Washington?
There is a Denny's out on Benning Road.
Oof.
Yeah, it was pretty far. I think it's Benning Road. It's somewhere around there. It was not. I had never been to a Denny's before. They don't really have them in Manhattan.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
And I have to say, it was not an experience I'm eager to repeat. I do love McDonald's. We drove to Indiana this weekend to pick up a puppy, and we ate at McDonald's like basically every meal.
It
and
is
was great.
delicious.
It is delicious.
McDonald's is
I mean,
delicious.
my stomach by the end, because I am no longer the spring chicken
Yeah,
who
yeah,
can
yeah.
just guzzle down anything. My stomach was like, enough.
What was the most objectionable thing you ate?
We didn't have anything
Did
objectionable.
you no McRib? No
Oh,
dump?
I did try the McRib for the first time. I'd never had one before. It
What
was
do you
okay.
say? Yeah,
it's okay.
it's okay.
It's not terrible. It's also not great. I don't
Yeah,
think I would
it's-
get one again.
It's okay.
yeah. It's
The
totally
McRib
fine.
and that's all I'm ever saying about the McRib. It's all I'm ever saying about the McRib. It's fine. It's an interesting treat and it's weird.
Yeah, I will say I did prefer the chicken McNuggets with the tangy barbecue sauce, and also I really like their hot mustard. I've always loved the hot mustard on the chicken McNuggets.
You know you're going to want to get a sidecar of whatever you get at McDonald's. You got to get a little sidecar of McNuggets with the hot mustard sauce to dip in.
Yeah.
It's a little buddy riding
'cause,
alongside.
Well, I mean, even if you don't eat the nuggets, putting your fries in that is high quality.
She's a woman. She's a woman of sophistication, and who knows what BlueSky is.
Yeah, I have opened an account on BlueSky.
Okay, tell me.
where I have like 90 followers. It is not. I would not call this a rousing success.
My Twitter wrangler encouraged me to start a BlueSky account, and I did, and I have not put anything on it, but it exists.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I had a debate over this with someone else I know, who was talking up BlueSky and saying this is way better than Twitter. It has none of the problems of Twitter. And what I realized as we debated, I eventually cut the debate short because what I realized was that we had fundamentally different experiences. This is kind of a left libertarian. So their entire experience of getting trolled is getting trolled by people on the right on Twitter. And also their fears about the institutions they're associated with was all about the right taking them over. And my experience is that my industry went kind of crazy progressive, especially around 2020, a phenomenon that I'm not like telling any secrets. I've written about this in my column many times. And also that I was constantly getting trolled by progressives who said really awful things to me all the time. And I had some filters in that made it less oppressive. So I just thought, yes, BlueSky is obviously a kind of nicer place if you are a certain kind of person. But that kind of person is the kind of person who spent a lot of time trying to get me fired over the last 8 years.
Yeah.
So my enthusiasm for going over to BlueSky is not high. What was interesting, though, was to watch Jesse Singal go over. Jesse Singal is such an odd figure because he wrote this piece for The Atlantic on detransitioners in 2018, which caused... I cannot even explain the lunacy around him. He's a basically normie center-left guy who wants single-payer health care.
I put him in the Iglesias kind of universe. Yeah.
And he is a science journalist, and his opinions are not that outrageous. But somehow the fact that he pointed out that some people detransition while also saying that doesn't mean that we should deny healthcare, just means maybe we should be a little more careful with our evaluations. Somehow that got him coded as a transphobe. The most vicious, crazy rumors circulated about him. So he went over to BlueSky, immediately became the most banned person. His account was suspended several times. People are, I mean, I will say I have a very high tolerance for death threats to the point where a few years back, one of my cousins went a little crazy when my grandmother was dying, as kind of often happens around these things. And because this person was already a little unstable, started sending my mother increasingly unhinged notes that would say things like the world is, 8 or 10 emails a day, and then got to like the world would be better off without you in it. And my mother is very upset and frightened. And so I am just desperately trying to calm her down. I'm like, Mom, I get death threats all the time. It's not a big deal. So just advice for listeners out there. The words, Mom, I get death threats all the time, does not in any way calm mothers down. That is not a phrase. If you are trying to soothe your mother, do not say those words. But I have a pretty high tolerance for it because mostly it's just stuff like the world would be better off without you in it. But there are actually people in a kind of scary way advocating for other people to shoot Jesse Singal.
And since we are in a time of political violence, you can go back to the George Floyd protests that turned riot. to January 6th, and now with the killing of the healthcare CEO, we are definitely in a phase where people are saying, but what about political violence? And all of the praise for Luigi Mangione?
I think it's Luigi Mangione. Yeah.
Colin's not Italian, so I'm not going to ask him, but all of the praise for this person. So we're going to do it. We're going to do political violence again.
And what's really weird is to see people who were complaining about how abusive Twitter was, about how it was violence, enthusiastically supporting the CEO discourse, but also kind of yelling at Jesse for making fun of the people who were saying, this is before the stuff where I was actually like, no, BlueSky should shut this down, and I have an enormous tolerance but this is actually getting over to the edge where you could call this incitement. But the people who were just saying things like he's a pedophile, he's a fascist, and Jesse would highlight some of the more unhinged stuff on his Twitter account. And then people are yelling at him for harassing people who have literally been calling him like a pedophile. That this is harassment, calling him a pedophile, not harassment. Highlighting people saying unhinged things about you, that is harassment. And it was just stunning to watch people who had been touting BlueSky as the kinder, gentler alternative where we wouldn't let the abuse get out of control, turning into this unhinged mob at someone who is really, I have met Jesse, I have read his stuff. He's really quite mild-mannered. And, I think he knows to some extent that he is provoking this when he goes to BlueSky, but the level of vitriol directed at him, and I have a pretty high vitriol count relative, I think, to my offenses, but Jesse just blows me out of the water. I feel like, what am I even doing here?
We can start being nice as soon as we get rid of all the bad people.
Yes.
We just have to get rid of all the bad people, and then we can be nice.
Indeed.
All right, we got to move on to our style section. Make the case for panettone.
Panettone is delicious.
Okay.
It is sweet. It is light.
It's an eggy Christmas bread.
It's an eggy Christmas bread. There's a lot of those around. Look, it has raisins in it. It's light. It's delicious.
But they do make a chocolate one.
They make a chocolate one. It's like it's like a brioche or an eggy bread. Yes, the one that you get in the supermarket is not at the absolute peak of freshness, hand-baked by your
nana. You're not
nana.
Sneering at it with the Atlantic.
No, the Atlantic says that panettone is terrible. And in the course, by the way, of talking about amazeballs, the high-end panettone revolution, Dolce & Gabbana coming out with a panettone.
How is theirs different?
Not clear. Doesn't actually seem to be much better, but he did order, I think, I'm going to look up the amount here. I should have had this to hand.
$102.
The $102 loaf of panettone. I'm going to be honest, I like going to the supermarket, Trader Joe's, the little Italian market near my house. I will grab just the one in the yellow box. I will happily toast that, slather it with a little butter for breakfast. And I find that a very satisfying eating experience. I'm sure the $102 panettone, I mean, as the piece finishes up, says that the 102, his panettone was as different from the other two as watching a movie about a drug trip is to doing the drugs yourself. It was spectacular. Emphasis very much mine.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I may actually eat some panettone this Christmas.
You should.
I never eat carbs, so it never comes in.
That makes me so sad for you.
But then at Christmas, there'll be the Overton window for carbohydrate consumption will expand and move, and perhaps panettone. You and Jessica both are fans of it, so
panettone influencers. It's my next gig.
You and I are both fans of Jeff Maurer and his I Might Be Wrong, which I have touted on this podcast many times. He has a piece, Baby, It's Cold Outside is good, so bite me, and happy holidays. Why did you like this piece?
Because I think it is, as with so many things that he writes, a useful corrective to the idea that we need to be self-aware and constantly interrogating every single thing in our lives. I will actually say I disagree with Jeff a little bit, which is that I think that Baby, It's Cold Outside just reflects a dynamic that those of us who grew up in the 80s and 90s might remember of like, I really shouldn't, but I would kind of like to. I am open to persuasion, but I don't interpret this as just some sad, lame guy nagging her to stay. I think
dance.
The dance of courtship, I'm not offended by it as long as he does in the end take no for an answer. But I think that the whole notion that every single thing in our life needs to be scrutinized for any possible
And
signs
coded, right?
and coded as political is like, can't we just all kick back with a Christmas cookie, maybe a nice cup of hot cocoa, and enjoy our traditional Christmas music? And so I was glad to see Maurer taking his scalpel, his deft, humorous scalpel, to a discourse that should never have existed in the first place.
All right. After the jump, it's time to talk about our obsessions of the week. Where we break down the stories that we can't get out of our heads. And I will move apace because Colin is getting anxious at how long. I can feel the sluggo sweatles coming off of the top of his head. Like, what was the name of that cartoon? The little girl and her dog. Now I'm just making it longer by trying to Nancy. Somebody will remember it for me. It'll come to me. Longtime aficionado of newspaper comics. Okay, since Eliana's not here,
Little Orphan Annie?
No, I know about that, but it was, I think the dog was Sluggo. Anyway, Kathy? No, that was the neurotic career.
Moment,
yeah. Okay, my obsession is drugs. New York Times piece: the CEOs are tripping. Can psychedelics help the C-suite? Also in the same vein, Shoaib Amari, I don't know how we describe. I describe him as a nationalist conservative.
Yeah, that seems
a Catholic integralist. I don't want to place any labels that are undue, but
I mean, I think he would evade them. He seems to shift somewhat frequently.
Yeah. So Shoaib Amari, who formerly of the New York Post, and now anyway. He took drugs also, and I believe ayahuasca, for his Roman Catholicism, to take him on a journey to his Roman Catholicism. There's a documentary out about what's his name, formerly of the Packers, now of the Jets, Aaron Rodgers. I don't know what the Jets record is. They've won like 3 games or something. Whatever drugs he was taking, apparently not effective. But the hallucinogenic enthusiasms of America's elite right now, and much like political violence, it feels to me like something that we tried as a nation 50 and 60 years ago, and found it wanting. That in the end, we found it wanting. And I don't want to in any way diminish the fact that hallucinogenic drugs can have great benefits for people suffering with depression and post-traumatic stress.
Although there is now some question.
Oh, lay it on me. What do you got?
It's not clear that they have large enough samples, that they're methodologically as rigorous as you would want.
At the very least, I'm open to the possibility that hallucinogenic drugs have medicinal effects for people struggling with different behavioral or mental problems. And I'm also happy to say that as long as you're not hurting anybody else, everybody ought to do. Aaron Rodgers ought to drink, cry, and vomit blood of whatever product that he wants to, and it doesn't cost me nothing. But I am struck just by the revisiting of the period of time at the hinge point at the end of the 60s and the 70s, and that period. And the violence and the drugs and the chaotic remaking of American culture, and the tune in, turn on, drop out, and friends of my parents, and again, these are people who had brass sailing ship trash cans. Friends of my parents did acid, and people were opening the doors of perception and doing all of this stuff. And I guess in the end, as the great philosopher Yogi Berra said, wherever you go, there you are. You can do a lot of stuff. You can try a lot of things. You can go a lot of places. But in the end, you will find yourself back with yourself, whatever journey you go on. So you better get good at one of the things that I've learned about growing up is, and I am not sure whether I will, but one of the things that I've learned about growing up is you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. That life brings much uncomfortability in it. The loss of loved ones, illness, career disruption, social anxiety, all of this stuff. And you shouldn't be insensitive to those things entirely. You should feel your feelings. But also, like, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. You have to be okay with things not being okay sometimes. And that's living in the world as it is, not as you wish it would be. And tripping out on ayahuasca will not ultimately remedy those problems. Harumph.
To quote the great movie, The Princess Bride, life is pain, princess. Anyone who tells you different is trying to sell you something.
Yeah.
Like an ayahuasca retreat.
And that's where joy and happiness are two different things. I can find joy even when I am not happy. All right. What was your obsession?
I am obsessed with Derek Thompson's new piece from The Atlantic on how somehow America is just randomly getting healthier. And it's not just one trend, it's a bunch of things, or at least we think it's a bunch of things coming together. So our auto fatalities are going down, and that does seem to be related to a post-pandemic decline. As I think many people realize, insane driving spiked a lot during the pandemic. It's still elevated. We still have thousands more car accidents than we did, fatal car accidents, than we did before the pandemic, but at least it is going in the right direction. Obesity is going in the right direction. Drug overdoses are going in the right direction. Obesity is probably Ozempic, or maybe just the fact that we've literally maxed out how fat the country.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm good for a bunch of that. I don't know what my share of the obesity drop was, but I did the work.
Overdoses are going up, and I actually think this goes back to the ayahuasca retreat, which is that a thing that you see in drugs is that there are trends. Is that basically what happens is the start of an epidemic, new drug is cool, a bunch of people try it. Eventually, those people start to die off as they overdose or otherwise, or they mess up their lives, or and then the people around them look and say, yeah, nope, I'm good. Yeah. And their younger siblings or so forth. So you've seen this before. There was the cocaine epidemic. And, when I was growing up in the 80s in New York, cocaine was everywhere, but no one did heroin. And I still remember the first time I ever saw someone doing opioids it was someone who showed up at my house. It was like a friend of a friend of a friend, of one of my roommate's friends, showed up, vomited, and then passed out. And I was like, that does not look like a fun drug. Yeah. And indeed, it turns out that I really hate opioids. They make me throw up, and I don't even enjoy them. But that then, as people saw the devastation of cocaine, right? I had a friend who overdosed. A lot of people did. You then people look for the next drug that becomes cool, and then people see the wreckage. And so I think part of what's happening, we have the overdoses going down from fentanyl, but people are like, okay, well, what's next? And it's not opioids, it's psychedelics.
And psychedelics will not kill you the way that opioids will.
There is a risk of psychosis if you have a family history of
you can break your brain. You can definitely break your brain. Yeah. That's for sure. All right. So the good news. There's good news in the
world. And I think one of the reasons I'm obsessed with this is A, that there's a lot of trends I'm thinking about, but also B, that with news, if it bleeds, it leads. Negative wins. I like to see something that's positive win.
And how much did we talk about? And I mentioned Matt Iglesias earlier, but he did good work on this. When we look at deaths of despair and all of that stuff, you can just watch the drug, exactly what you described. And I watched it in West Virginia a long time ago. Start out, and prescription opioids, and then heroin comes in, and heroin is not. It doesn't go up and on from heroin. Right?
Yeah.
Heroin kills people. It's hideous to look at. It's devastating. And so good. All right. Reader mail, Colin, I'm going. This is a epistle from Matt Ostrowski.
Ostrowski.
Thank you. Matt, I apologize.
I hope I got that right, Matt. Apologies.
We're
if I
going
did
with
not.
it, Mr. Ostrowski, who writes us from Bozeman, Montana. He says, I'm sure I won't be the only one sending this, but anxiously await Chris's musings about it on the next podcast, ! Wretch on, ! Heck yeah. Not falling for the McRib ruse, then why are there 12 of them in your freezer? Wall Street Journal piece. 73-year-old man buys about a dozen extra McRibs, wraps each individually in plastic, and stores them in his freezer. Culp starts working through them a month or two after the McRib season ends. He says they still taste good, though he removes the pickles because they don't reheat well. His supply has lasted as long as 6 months. It's my stash, my legal stash, he said. McRib season, and I may be transitioning away from McRibs. Maybe this has been my arc, because they were sketchy, rare, and they would come around every year. And my sons and I had a tradition of eating a parking lot McRib when we would happen upon a McDonald's where they had the McRib. Now the McRib is everywhere. I saw a video on Instagram of a guy making a Bloody Mary with McRib sauce. Like, it's too much. And you certainly don't freeze a McRib. A McRib is like a funnel cake. It is something bad for you that is weird and delicious, and you should eat it. You should take it as it comes, right? You should.
Part of the joy.
Part of the joy is that you've come upon this thing. And I would definitely hoard food 100%. I know that when I am old, I will be like my father, and I will have 900 ounces of ketchup in the pantry ready. I don't know what my dad thought we were going to do he's like, wow, when y'all come back to visit, it's like you ran out of ketchup one time 3 years ago. We don't need that much. And I know that I'm unwell, but no, I would not, Mr. Ostrowski, freeze a McRib.
You were talking, I have to say, when I used to go through New York in a car, I had a whole run. There was my bagel shop.
Yes.
Which, by the way, just got shut down for health things, which makes me sad.
It speaks well of them in their own way.
They really bombed their health inspection. I would stop. This was, in fairness, I stopped going to them years ago, but I'm sad for everyone on the Upper West Side who has lost Absolute Bagels. Rest in peace, my friend.
R.I.D.
May the memory be a blessing. And so I would go to the bagel shop, and then I would go to my pizza place, Sal's and Carmine's, on Broadway and 101st. And then, as we drove through New Jersey, I would take a stop off in Hoboken and grab some meatball sandwiches from Mario's. And I would take all of this food and I would bring it home and I would put it in our freezer and I would slowly work my way through it.
Wow, you're a much more disciplined person than I am.
I would, well, I mean, because when I moved to D.C., you couldn't get stuff like this. Now it's different. Now I have my Italian store with good meatball sandwiches. There's
Call your mother.
Call your mother. There's Andy's Pizza, which, by the way, Andy's Pizza and Wise Guys both do a very serviceable New York style slice.
Yes.
And so I don't feel that need anymore, but I have a sneaking.
And I never eat
here.
a fried fish sandwich except for when I'm in Wheeling, West Virginia, and go to Coleman's Fish Sandwich.
Well,
and when you're there, you got to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, that brings us to my favorite time of the show, where we talk about our favorite items of the week. And my favorite item of the week is from something called The Hustle, and I don't know what The Hustle is, and it has profanity in the link, and I apologize for that. But as befits the topic, this is how the weirdest store at the mall survived the retail apocalypse. And we were talking before the show that you'd never been to a Spencer's Gift.
I have not. I had heard of it, but I had never been to one.
But I can tell you that at the Ohio Valley Mall in St. Clairsville, Ohio, the Spencer's was a rite of passage. And this fascinating piece explains how Spencer's, which for anyone who doesn't know, is a place where you could buy fake dog feces, a Lordy Lordy Look Who's 40 birthday card, and then some like edible underwear. Spencer's is going to be your number one, probably national retail of edible underwear. If you're looking for a gift to take to somebody, do you need a horn? Do you need a cane that has a horn on it and a sign that says old fart to take to my 50th birthday next year, you'll go to Spencer's.
Am I invited?
Yes, absolutely. But you
Okay,
have to bring
I
a
will
cane.
come with the cane.
You have to bring a cane with a horn on it and a sign that says "Old Fart." So this is a fascinating story about how Spencer survived by being dirty in a titillating, not salacious. No, there's nothing sexy about Spencer's, but as a kid, it felt like it was like, oh, it's a little. And they kept it in the back of the store. And how Spencer's has I don't know if they've thrived, but has survived. And I didn't know this that I found out in this story. The company that owns Spencer's also owns Spirit Halloween.
I mean,
And the energy is the same. It's the same. It's where basically what they're saying is, isn't any good? But it's here. It's weird.
it's fun.
And it's fun. That's exactly right. It's fun for the sake of being fun.
Let's have a bit of a laugh, buy some stuff, not take any of it too seriously.
Well, how
It's a
about,
good business model?
and what was your favorite item?
My favorite item of the week is the man who attempted to return a library book to the Detroit area public library. After 50 years, he was at home in the Chicago area where he now lives, and he was looking at the books on his shelf when he realized that his copy of Baseball's Zaniest Stars had a Dewey Decimal Number on the spine. And he realized that he had checked the book from the Warren Public Library on December 4th, 1974. I was so embarrassed, he told the Detroit Free Press. So when he went back to Detroit for Thanksgiving, he, like a good and honorable citizen, attempted to return the book. The library, undoubtedly a bit surprised, said they didn't have it in their system and he couldn't return it. And also, they were nice enough to waive the 25-cent per day overdue fee, which would have amounted to $4,563.75. Chris Hildebrandt, the fellow who this happened to, responded in kind and to this generosity and is now attempting to raise the amount of that waived fee to donate to a nonprofit literacy group. Reading is fundamental. He put in the first $457 and is trying to crowdfund the rest. And I just think, there are a lot of interactions in this world that can go well or badly. They can be positive some or negative some. And it is a choice by the participants as to whether they are positive some, they make everything better, or they're negative some, they make everything worse. I think we all had customer service interactions like that. But this is another example where everyone in this story behaved as well as possible, with the possible exception of, Chuck Hildebrandt's younger self, who irresponsibly failed to return. But maybe he just loved Baseball's Zaniest Stars so much he could not bear.
Casey Stengel, Rabbit, Mandeville, Rube Waddell, Bobo Newsom, Dizzy Dean, and the Gas House Gang. I want to read this.
So you should write and ask to borrow.
Exactly.
So he did the right thing. The library did the right thing. He's now doing the right thing even more. And I just think and now everyone should have a smile on their face. Thanks to Chuck Hildebrandt and the Warren Public Library. Thanks to all.
That's some wholesome business.
I am just a festival of wholesome courage.
That's a Chris, as my pants and your wholesomeness were taking us into the Christmas season with joy in our hearts. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Really enjoyed it. And Eliana will be back from her sojourn soon. And we'll be back with more news about the news. But for now, that's all the time we have. If you have a story you want to talk about, you want us to talk about, email us at wretches@nebulouspodcast.com and sign up for our newsletter at nebulouspodcast.com. This has been a very joyous Ink-Stained Wretches from Nebulous Media, produced by the great Colin Chicola. Find us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Wretches.